We have a monster NFC North matchup on Thursday Night Football, and it's time for the Green Bay Packers to prove it. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. Make sure to listen to every episode of Locked On NFL on Amazon Music. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the MVP race in the NFL. We got some front runners. We got some dark horse candidates. Josh Allen might be the favorite right now. But first, we're going to start with this big-time Thursday night football game between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. Do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first to listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and Crossover Thursday is always presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5. Michelle, this game, the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions, you know, the Lions are one of the hottest teams in the NFL, but they definitely have some injuries on the defensive side of the ball. On yesterday's show, I talked about that with Luke Braun. We had Matt Derry's clip from Locked On Lions just going through the laundry list of injuries, and it hasn't mattered yet, but at some point you think it might matter, and with Green Bay losing to Detroit pretty handily last time, I think it's time for the Green Bay Packers to prove that they're the level of team that their fan base and the media seems to think that they are.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to think that they're true Super Bowl contenders. So you have to come against one of the best teams in the NFL, in your own division, and everything. Like, it does stink that they're 9-3 in third place in their division, right? Like, that never happens to have this good of a record and have so many teams with such a good record in one division. It also stinks for the Lions that, like, this is also a must-win game to stay for that number one seed because they have the Vikings right behind them, because they have the Eagles. It's like, these are both, I mean, this is just going to be a huge game. I'm really excited because Thursday, we don't normally get this exciting of a game.
Yeah, it's very rare that we have good games like this. But I'll be honest with you. The reason why I'm kind of focused on the Packers needing to prove it is because you look at their schedule so far and they've beat okay teams, but every good team that they've played, they've lost to. Like the Eagles and the Vikings and the Lions. Like, what's their best win this year? 24-22 over the Texans, or, 34-13 over the Cardinals. One of those, I guess. And that's something that my guy Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers, he talked about that too. This team needs to prove it.
The Green Bay Packers only have 3 losses. But those losses are to the Philadelphia Eagles, the Detroit Lions, and the Minnesota Vikings. The 3 best teams they have played so far this season. Now, it is good to have only lost to good teams. You would hope at the end of the season, you look back at your record and you say, well, we only lost to good teams. That would be the goal every single year. You only have 3 or 4 losses, and they're all to good teams. 400 yards of offense in all of them. Offensive efficiency in all of them. Turnovers in all of them. Dumb penalties in all of them. Situational issues in all of them. And by the way, missed field goals in all of them.
Sounds like a young team. Everybody talks about how, the Green Bay Packers have the youngest roster in the NFL, like it's a feather in their cap. But also, whenever they lose games, they look like the youngest roster in the NFL, and they make all these mistakes. And that's why they can't seem to beat good teams. And Pete's right. You want to lose games to good teams. Nobody goes undefeated. I mean, that's not a realistic expectation. So the couple of losses that you have, if you're a good team, you would think would be to good teams, or at least teams in your division. Those games are always tougher. But you got to have some wins against good teams too to be a good team. And I don't see any wins on the Packers schedule that are against legitimate, very good football teams. I mean, I guess the Rams are good, but they were beat up when they played. Again, we talk about that Cardinals loss. How good are the Cardinals? The Texans, how good are the Texans? I mean, I hate to poo-poo everything, but I just don't see a ton of good wins. And Miami, maybe last week, is the best win they have. Miami doesn't even have a winning record. So, like, go out and prove it, Green Bay. Be a winning team. Show that you're capable.
And then after this week, it's the Seahawks. Like, no one really takes them too seriously, right? Like, I know they're leading the division. And then the Saints. Okay. And then you get the Vikings. I guess you have one more chance to show that you could beat a good team. But for some reason, I know they're 10-2. I still don't even take the Vikings that seriously. Bears. So it's not like they have a pretty easy schedule coming up. And the Lions, on the other hand, have to face not only the Packers, but then the Bills next week. So I think this is a more important game for the Lions right now, because also think about a team that needs, if the difference in these playoffs, if it's through Detroit or if it's through Philadelphia, Goff cannot play in the cold, but he can play amazingly in his own dome. So like your offense is going to be so different in the playoffs. Well, I guess it would just be the conference championship at that point, but like it's so different if it goes through Detroit than if it goes through a cold city.
Yeah, for the Lions, there's no place like dome. Okay, I'm sorry. I had to do it. My apologies to everyone listening. But I think with the Lions, maybe I'm doomcasting here, but I could see an end of the season downturn for the Lions. Not only did you mention the schedule going forward, but Luke and I talked about this on yesterday's episode. My everydayers will know, but they have been excellent on defense even after all the injuries. But you have to wonder at some point in time, all of these injuries have to take their toll. And with a game against the Packers and a game against the Bills, like I just feel like we could see the Lions lose a couple of games here in the back stretch of the season, maybe lose out on that number one seed. And then the conversation being going into the playoffs, did the Lions peak too early, which is something that we see certain teams do every single year. So I am kind of seeing a downturn for the Lions here, and I am going to say that the Lions lose this game. I think the Packers do put it all together. I'm going to go with Green Bay. What says you?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it turn with all those injuries in the second half of that Thanksgiving game, right? Like
I wasn't that impressed.
They didn't let the Bears do anything in the first half, and then they started to get a bunch of injuries to the defensive line, and guy after guy was going down, and then all of a sudden they let Caleb Williams come back, score 3 touchdowns in that second half. So I'm also going with the Packers. As long as Jordan Love doesn't turn over the ball 3 times, which he could, or multiple times, I should say, I think the Packers win.
Yeah, I'm with you there, but this is going to be a great football game. And like you said, we don't get a lot of these on Thursday. So not only is it the end of the season, but this is a great matchup, and we're going to cherish it. But speaking of the end of the season, it's time to talk MVP, and we're going to get into that. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the final third of the NFL season. It makes me sad to say that, but that is exactly where we're at. The final third of the NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So, FanDuel Sportsbook really is the best place to place live bets on the NFL, because you get everything all in one place. You get a hunch in the middle of a game. You can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You know, we go over our best bets on the Friday episode of Locked On NFL, so you can check that out as well for that first $5 bet. But again, it's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Well, our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, or my personal favorite, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever, you can tune in wherever, plus you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Make sure that you go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and again, it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register, hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, Michelle, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about this Thursday night football matchup, but now I want to follow up on a conversation that my guy Tony Wiggins had on the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL yesterday and talk about some of these MVP candidates, because I talked about it a couple of weeks ago when Josh Allen beat the Kansas City Chiefs with most of his weapons hurt or some of his weapons just out of that game. And I thought that he was the MVP favorite in that game. But I think Josh Allen could get even better. And my guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills talked about the levels that he could continue to get to.
It's just developing more chemistry with his weapons. Not anything that he's done wrong. It's just there are times when you watch Josh Allen execute this offense and you're reminded that these are new players around him. So I think that's number one. It's just having more reps, more time with his guys, and I think that's going to lead to a little bit more consistency with the ball placement. He does have a fairly high off-target throw percentage this year compared to past years. I think number two is executing the quick game. This has become a bigger part of what Josh Allen has to do, and it may appear simple to hit your back foot and just rip the ball, quicker, shorter passes. But for a player like Josh Allen that has every ounce of physical skill imaginable, sometimes just, hey, rock and throw, that ball can come out a little bit weird. He's used to ripping it down the field. There's different, got to have different clubs in the bag, right? Different clubs in the bag for different throws. I think developing even more consistency with those types of throws. And boy, has he gotten better this year.
So, I mean, right now, Josh Allen has to be the MVP favorite, right?
I mean, I feel like people would still put Lamar just because they're going to look at, their numbers and say, well, Lamar's numbers are better. But you guess whose numbers were better across the entire board last year besides the interception column, and Lamar still won, right? I feel like Allen should already have a couple MVPs under his belt, but because he didn't break out until Stephon Diggs got there. So I felt like a lot of the times people were like, well, it's, he has Stephon Diggs, so that's why he's so good. And then, it was the interceptions as well that was keeping him from out of it. But now he's lowered the interceptions. He doesn't have great cast of receivers. Like, they're all pretty much just all new together there. And Lamar has a great cast of guys now. And then with Derrick Henry. So if you're going to choose between the two of who's really the most valuable to their team, like, you take Josh Allen off of this Bills team and they're not even close to what they are. Like, he's everything to that offense.
Yeah, 100%. And listen, some people may disagree with me on this, and I realize I might be in the minority, but I really take historical context into play when I'm giving out MVP. When I think about my awards, like the seasonal awards should tell a story in the NFL. And maybe it's just, I work in the media and I love my narratives and my stories and all of that. But I'm also a historian of the NFL who was raised in an NFL household, and I know all the legends of the game, and I was told all those stories. And I agree with you that Josh Allen should have some sort of MVP hardware already based on how great of a player and how impactful of a player and how important of a player. The definition of most valuable player to me is, if you take this guy off the team, what would the team be? And you just said, you take Josh Allen off this team, they're nowhere even close. And look, you could make that argument for Lamar too, but Lamar already has 2 MVPs. It's time for Josh Allen to get one, and his team has been fantastic this year. He's been fantastic, and you can make the point like you did, and you're right. You stack the numbers up, you can absolutely make the case for Lamar Jackson. But we have watched the games, and there have been some games where Lamar Jackson did not do enough to help his team. And I can't think of a game other than the Texans game for Josh Allen where he really did not step up and make it happen. And quite frankly, my guy Kevin IceShaker from Locked On Ravens kept it real this week and said, one of the big reasons that the Eagles beat the Ravens is because Lamar didn't have a good game.
Obviously, Lamar struggled. Lamar certainly had a pretty poor game on Sunday. Because, again, we're here to praise Lamar Jackson when it's due and criticize him when it's due. And we can criticize Lamar, missed some throws for sure, didn't take rushing lanes when they were open and available to him. He certainly had his moments. He had his Lamar Jackson moments. I'm not saying he was awful, and this is the worst game I've ever seen out of him. But there were certainly moments that Lamar wishes he could have had back, and a lot of people identified that. Lamar himself, the coaching staff, broadcast, people watching the game, or whoever. It was apparent that Lamar was not on his A game on Sunday. And to be fair to Lamar, he shouldn't have to be on his A game every game. But when he doesn't have a good game, we're going to talk about it, much like we talk about his good games. But Lamar shouldn't have to be on his A game all the time for the Ravens to win. And there were still moments where Lamar was able to do some good things. But still, wasn't a great game from Lamar, all things considered.
And that was a big matchup against the Eagles. So, I mean, I am a Lamar hater, I guess, because I'm always asking for more or wanting him to see him prove it in the playoffs. And I kind of feel like that now. Like, we've seen Lamar fail in the playoffs enough where I'm not giving him any more MVPs until he does it in the playoffs. And likewise, Josh Allen deserves to have one.
Yeah, and honestly, like, we're just getting into Josh Allen's like prime time. Like, when he gets into December and January, he is so stinking good in regular season games since 2020 in December and January. He's 20-2, his record, 11-0 since 2022 in those games. He also has 60 total touchdowns in those games since 2020, 15 more than any other player in that time period. So like, what he can do in this cold weather too, once he gets starting to get real, like, gritty, he's such a good player, and he really just deserves to have that MVP.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is what he can do in the run game. When it gets cold, it's harder to pass. You got to get on the ground. He's going to find a way to score. And I also think that high-profile matchups really matter in these conversations. And the Rams may not be the best team in the NFL who the Bills play this week. They're not one of the top contenders, but the Rams are a high-profile team that people pay attention to when they play. So the Bills play them this week, and then they play the Lions in Detroit next week. And I think if Josh Allen plays well in both those games and the Bills win both those games, the last 3 games of the year are the Patriots, the Jets, and the Patriots again. Josh Allen doesn't even have to do much to win those games. I think he can seal up the MVP in the next 2 weeks with 2 good performances.
And think, like, the difference between Allen and Lamar too is, like, we went into the season expecting the Ravens to be the number 1 seed, right? Like, that was where we all had them. They're 8-5. Like, they're actually kind of disappointing. I know losses and wins are all on the quarterback, but with Josh Allen and the Bills, like, they were maybe a team that was going to miss the playoffs, right? With all they're rebuilding, right? And now Allen has carried them to 10-2. So they're over exceeding expectations, while Lamar's team is doing the opposite.
100%. Now, the outside sources create the expectations, but at the end of the day, this is what we do. So get over it, do better. That's all I got to say about that. But there are some MVP candidates out there that need to be in the discussion as well, including Saquon Barkley from the Philadelphia Eagles, and he'll get his shine. We'll talk about him and one other dark horse MVP candidate that I know will make Michelle smile at the end of the show. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. And somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower than 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, Michelle, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We talked about this awesome Thursday night football matchup that lies ahead of us between the Packers and the Lions. Talked about Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson for MVP. And right now, I think both of us giving that edge to Josh Allen. But Saquon Barkley is really putting some pressure on. We haven't seen an NFL MVP at the running back position since, I believe, Adrian Peterson, when he ran for 2,000 yards in 2009, I believe, was the season. I graduated high school in 2009. It's been a long, long time since a running back won MVP, but Saquon has basically put the Eagles on his back. And not only that, I think he's put the running back position as a whole on his back. And my guys over at Locked On Eagles talked about how Saquon Barkley is a trendsetter and how we look at running back moving forward.
I don't even know, like, you hear me stuttering because I don't even know what to say about this guy anymore. Because
he jumped Lamar in the MVP voting. FanDuel now has him second.
Set your watch to it every single week that you can guarantee he is going to have 1 to 2 knockout runs every single week. He is a killer in multiple ways. Saquon is a trendsetter. The Eagles signing him was ahead of the curve. You're going to see so many teams overreact drafting line or running backs this year because of Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, those guys who have just completely overhauled some already really good teams for the better. But Saquon's a one-on-one.
I agree with him there. You know, I think the running back position as a whole will be valued a little bit more than maybe the conversation has had for it in the last few years because of the performance of some of these free agent running backs. But I think we have to be careful here because, you know, like Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, great players, but Saquon is a whole different level of explosion and versatility. So I think we do need to be careful with how much we swing back the other way to valuing running backs.
No, for sure. Like Saquon is a special kind of player right now. And it really goes to show like how important you're, like what team you land on, right? Because he didn't get, you could see like his talents, right? On certain breakoff runs, stuff like that in pass or receptions in New York. But without having a great team around him, you truly didn't get to appreciate how amazing he could have been throughout his career. But so far this year, he's joined Jim Brown as the only players in NFL history with 1,400 plus rushing yards, averaging 6 yards per carry with 10 or more rushing touchdowns over their team's first 12 games of a season. Jim Brown did that back in 1963, and Saquon's now the first one to do it since him.
I mean, if you do something, you're the first person to do it since Jim Brown. I don't care what the stat really is. That is incredibly impressive. I mean, Jim Brown is an absolute GOAT. I do want to make this comparison, I guess, while we're talking about running backs. To me, a great running back, especially a guy like Saquon, it's like a shaved truffle. So, you know, truffle mac and cheese. All right, well, the mac and cheese still needs to be great for it to be. You can't just put shaved truffle on Kraft mac and cheese and make it a 5-star Michelin, you know, premium side. You can't just take a mushroom burger from Wendy's and throw some black truffle on it and now it's, you know, high quality. Like, you got to have something fantastic, and that truffle can be the magical topping that takes it to another level, absolutely, but you still have to have a quality product. And I think that, you know, the comparison of, oh, well, the Titans and the Raiders and the Giants are all crappy now. And, you know, look at Saquon and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs teams. Okay, well, you know, the Packers and the Ravens and the Eagles made the playoffs last year. So it's not like he like took some crap team and turned them completely around. So I guess I want to give the credit where the credit is due, but I think you're right that situation is so important that it's not like these running backs would have taken lottery teams to playoff contenders. They landed on great teams that they are like the cherry on top of.
Oh yeah, I mean, Saquon could still be with the Giants this year. They may have one more win, if even that. Like, I don't even know if he would got them one more win in the column. It doesn't. They really are. They're the last piece of the puzzle for a team that's looking to win a Super Bowl. That's like what the 49ers did bringing in Christian McCaffrey a few years ago. They had it all.
Yes.
So they traded for him, and it was amazing, right?
Jahmyr Gibbs as well.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs for the Lions. Like, it was after they built up their team. It was after they built up the important spots of the roster.
Yes.
Then you go for that incredibly talented guy that can do it both as a runner and a receiver and make that difference maker. But if you just have that without the other pieces, I just got a cramp in my leg if you're watching this YouTube, and I made a weird thing. But if you don't have the other pieces, it doesn't matter at all.
That's the ghost of running backs past being mad about the way that we're talking about running backs right now. So, but I also do want to bring one other name to the conversation. All right. And it is a long shot. It is a dark horse. Absolutely. But Russell Wilson from the Pittsburgh Steelers, their offense has changed entirely. They are formidable, and they are in striking distance of, if things, let's say the Lions beat the Bills, and let's say the Chiefs got a couple of tough games here at the end of the season. If the Pittsburgh Steelers get the number 1 seed, Russell Wilson, MVP, I'm just saying our guys over at Locked On Steelers, led by Chris Carter, kind of talked about how Russell Wilson has transformed the team.
The Steelers are now averaging 28.6 points per game when Russell Wilson starts. On the year right now, their offense has scored 24.7 points per game. That is just ahead of the Kansas City Chiefs, and notwithstanding Monday Night Football, anything that might change, that is right at the edge of the top 10 in the NFL. That they are a top 10 offense. Officially in scoring. Say whatever you want about how they're getting there, what you think about Russell Wilson. This is what they are right now. They put up a lot of points against the Bengals. Yes, they're a bad defense, but that's still a team that when the Chiefs beat them, the Chiefs were great for doing so. When the Ravens swept them, the Ravens were great for doing so. And now the Steelers are 9-3. If they beat the Ravens again and win one other game this season, that alone would clinch the division. They have played very well. They've beaten several really good teams this year, teams at least that are high up in their win totals.
High profile matchups. Matchups is what I continue to say. The Steelers play the Eagles next week. They play the Ravens again after that. They play the Chiefs after that. If the Steelers were able to run the table, get the number 1 seed, and Russell Wilson plays great through all those games and primetime matchups, we cannot sit here and say with an absolute certainty that he would not win MVP.
Listen, I feel you, right? Because right now, I mean, he's been playing very, very well, and it's been fun as a Steelers fan to actually see this offense. Like previously, after the Ben era, right? And we had to deal with Kenny Pickett or any Mitch Trubisky or anybody like that.
Mason Rudolph.
Mason Rudolph, but he was actually the good one out of that bunch, which is insane. But since Russell Wilson took over as a starter for the Steelers in week 7, the Steelers rank 2nd in the NFL in total yards per game, 3rd in passing yards per game, 3rd in passing yards per attempt, 1st in time of possession, 6th in points per game. And they're 5-1. Like, they've been killing it. And like you said, if they can beat the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Chiefs, that's all in a 10-day span as well. Like, the schedule makers really did the Steelers dirty here. If they could do that, and then that Chiefs game is on Christmas, right? If Russell Wilson comes out and can beat the Chiefs and put up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game, he would be on the radar. It does stink for them that he can't sink for Russ, that he can't win comeback player of the year this year because they changed the rules. He should at least be winning that, but he can't because he didn't get injured.
What's crazy to me is you go to FanDuel, Russell Wilson is 20th in MVP odds at plus 50,000. Plus 50,000. Like, as soon as we wrap this, I'm going to throw a little $10 on it or something. Players like Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Matt Stafford, CJ Stroud, Kyler Murray, Bo Nix, Tua are all ahead of Russell Wilson. Are people not looking at this schedule and what he could potentially do? Again, it's a dark horse. We're not saying that it's likely at all. As a matter of fact, I'm putting that $10 on it right now. I'm scared that it'll change. $10 to win 5,000. I'll do that for Russell Wilson, man. There is a chance here that he can really make an impression and win that award. Again, it's a long shot, but I'm just saying that I'm just saying.
Listen, you got me thinking now. Now it could go terribly wrong, right? They could lose all those games and he could stink and he might not be a Steeler next year. There's a very wide range of outcomes here, but he definitely does have the opportunity to prove himself and work his way towards winning the MVP, which would be crazy.
It would be crazy. But hey, It's the NFL. Crazy things happen every single week. But with that being said, that is going to do it for us today on this Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed, check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL. I'll be back with you tomorrow for some of my best bets of the week and recapping this crazy game between the Packers and the Lions that lies ahead. But for me, the host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, and the data queen herself, Michelle Majuk, as we always tell you, stay safe out there.
Bye, y'all.